Hello and welcome back to the studio. Today's little seascape painting was inspired by Bob Ross, of course, and a little trip to a place called Littlehampton. It's just a 10 or 15 minute drive down the coast from where we live now. It was jolly chilly, and after a little bit of filming, which you can see up in the corner, we retreated to a local cafe. We thought, time for a warm up, and of course a piece of rocky road really helped. So sit back and relax, watch me develop this little painting based upon all these little experiences of painting seascapes. I make some mistakes and some corrections as I go, and I point out some little sort of failings which I think a lot of other people might have when they're painting seascapes. So make sure you watch right to the end. There are lots of little bits and pieces and tips and tricks all the way through the painting. So sit back, relax, cup of tea, piece of rocky road, and watch me paint this lovely seascape. Happy painting, people. So here's my canvas. It's 16 inches by 20, of course, and a piece of masking tape here. This is my horizon line. It's a little bit lower than halfway down my canvas. First thing I want to do is apply a thin even coat of Bob Ross liquid white oil paint. This is a wet and wet oil painting technique. I keep it in a small airtight pot for ease of application. I'm going to use a couple of Bob Ross 1-inch landscape brushes, an older one for the liquid white and a nicer one for blending. I'll use a liner brush, a fan brush and a couple of filler brushes. This one is a little bit older and better for scrubbing on paint. And of course a Bob Ross palette knife. So let's get started with our painting. I'm going to use that old 1-inch brush and a small amount of liquid white. Remember, I said a thin, even coat. We don't want the painting to be too wet. Hang on to your canvas and scrub this well into the surface. I'll leave a link to a video that explains how to apply this in detail. I like to finish off with some long, flat strokes. Take care not to pull off the masking tape. As you see, I'm doing a little fingertip test to make sure that I've got a nice amount applied. Here's my palette, and I'll list the colours down below. First thing I want to do is take a little bit of cad yellow and some Indian yellow. I'll mix those up. I'll add a little bit of titanium white to the side of it to make a nice pastel yellow colour. My next colour wants to be a sort of salmon pink colour. I start with some titanium white and add a little speck of red. Mix it well and adjust the colour to suit. Maybe a little more red for this one. And I'll add a little tiny touch of Indian yellow too. This gives you the most wonderful salmon pink colour. I also want a pastel blue colour. I add a small amount of phthalo blue to some white. If it's too bright, I could always add some black, but I didn't add any on my palette just yet. In the end, I didn't use any at all. I'm going to start with this old filbert brush, and I pick up some of the bright yellow colour from my palette. I want the sort of middle area of my sky to be the bright yellow colour. As you can see, I just scrub on a small amount. Keep it loose. You don't really want a tight shape. Allow this yellow colour to break up at the edges. Next, some of that lovely salmon pink colour we made. Same brush, I didn't bother cleaning it, and I can vary my colour by adding more red or ochre to the tones to get it just as I want. Let this colour sort of bump into the edge of the yellow. Again, I'm using just little crisscross strokes here. I want this to be very, very loose. Let's add a touch of red to warm things up a little bit. I encourage you to take time when you're doing these sorts of paintings to really sort of walk away from your painting and have a look at it from the other side of the room. You'll see all sorts of things in your painting when you take some time. There, I think that's about right. Time for a soft blend. I'm going to use that old 1-inch brush for this. It might be a little bit scratchy, but well, I think it'll do okay. It's still got a bit of liquid white on. In this area, I think I'll be adding a bit of a bright spot. Let's dry clean my brush and go for some of that lovely pastel blue colour. I know there's yellow on the brush and it might go green, but we'll take a chance. Work your paint well through the bristles. If the paint goes green, it'll be on your palette. I think we're okay. Now, continue adding the blue paint using those same crisscross strokes. I work close to the red because at least the worst colour I would get would be sort of a lavender tone. And I'll avoid the yellow colours for the time being. I can just detect the slightest touch of green here and there, but it actually looks quite good in my painting. Keep on blending, standing back and blending a little more. So at this stage of my painting, I was quite happy with the sky, but it did lack a little bit of something. And I sat back with a cup of tea and considered it from the other side of the room. Then it occurred to me, I just didn't have enough contrast. I had lots of lovely mid-tones, lots of lovely soft pinks and oranges and yellows and pale blues, but I didn't have enough darks in there. And this is something I think people do struggle with sometimes in their paintings. You do lovely work and then you're afraid to put in a little bit of something with a bit of gravitas, a bit of body to it. But be brave. Sometimes that little bit of extra dark makes the lighter colours really shine. And of course, later on you'll see I add a real sparkle to my sky. So carry on watching. I want a lavender tone. I'm going to use some alizarin crimson and a little bit of phthalo blue. About 5 parts crimson, 1 part blue. Mix it thoroughly, and as you see from the colour on my palette, you'll notice the colour change. It can be quite a sort of sudden change and it'll be too blue, so go steady with it. I'll also make a soft pastel version of this with a little bit more titanium white to one side. There, I think that's about right for my painting, but let's try a little test. No, not in the centre, of course. I want to be going at the corners. If it's too strong, I can do something with it, but if it's right in the middle, I might be in trouble. So let's put in just a little bit here and stand well back. I think we're fairly safe, but it's still, well, maybe a little bit pastel. Let's add a little bit more of that neat colour. That's looking better. My eyes being drawn to the centre of the painting a little bit more. Creating a stunning sky takes time. So, do a little stand back, walk away, get a cup of tea. I think we're about right now. I'll add more to the opposite corner and blend it in. As you see, I work around my painting, adding small amounts of colour here and there. Now, time for some more blending. One of my favourite things to use are my fingers. Just sit them on the edges of these clouds and give them a little smudge. But not everybody likes getting their fingers in the paint, and maybe you prefer to use a brush. So I've brought this brush out to play. This is a Bob Ross blender brush. I'm sorry I didn't include it at the start of the video, but well, I didn't know I was going to use it. It's super soft. As you can see, it barely moves the paint, but the overall effect is rather delightful. I want to create a light spot in my sky, maybe for some sun behind the clouds. I've got some titanium white and I'm going to just smudge it in here. Just hold the brush in one spot and give it a good rub. I don't want this paint to blend too much, I want it to remain a little bit more intense. But as you see, the paint just wants to sink in to the background colours. I'll give it a bit of a blend, but well, maybe I have to come back and do this a second time. I'll leave it till later. Time to move on to the sea. I've pulled off that bit of masking tape for the horizon line, and using my old 1-inch brush, which has got a few colours on it, I just want to use it to fill in that dry line where the tape was. I'll clean my brush off across the canvas. So here's the brushes I've used so far. The soft blender, an old 1-inch brush and a couple of filberts. For my sea, I'm going to use that same lavender colour, but I'm going to darken it a little bit more. I'm still using that old filbert brush. I want to just scrub in some colour. It wants to be a little bit more intense than the background sky, and I think that's about right. Now, time for some planning. I want some rocks in my painting, so I'll just block them in roughly here. I think I need to know where the sea line or the shore is going to be, which is roughly here. And I want some big foam just about here. Again, so a nice big sort of shape. And this is where the wave is going to be. And this line, which is very important, is the floor of the wave, where the wave meets the beach. This little angle indicates how the water rises up and forms the wave. This is the eye of the wave. Now I've got that basic sketch done, I can fill in the background sea. I use little touches of lavender here and there. Directly under the area of the sky, which is nice and bright, I want to include a few touches, maybe of some light dappling across the surface of the water. And I just stipple it on, just tap it here and there. I'll add some extra little bits of the lavender colour as we go, so I leave a few holes. If you enjoy my videos, don't forget, leave a little like, that's a thumbs up, down below. If you have questions, leave a comment for me. And if you want to see more videos, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. Let's turn our attention to the eye of the wave. It's the area where the water is thin and the light will shine through. I'm using my nice filbert brush with a touch of white and a little bit of Indian yellow on it. Just scrub this colour into the canvas. This colour will also be reflected on the beach, so I'll scrub some in here as well. Let's not forget, we'll add some of that lovely salmon pink colour and probably a little bit of blue as well. They should all be reflected somewhere on the beach. Now, back into that pale blue colour, I want to work on this part of my painting. This is where the foam splashes up when it hits the back of those rocks. It's quite difficult to paint foamy white effects against a pale background, and adding a little blue will add a little bit of depth of colour to my wave. I'm also going to scrub in a little bit of that blue colour to the foamy edge above the wave. You'll see in a minute how this works to our advantage. At the base of the wave and just above the rocks, I scrub in a little of the lavender colour as well. This is where I want the deepest shadow to be in the wave. Without it, again, the foam will look very flat and uninteresting. I finally use a fan brush, and I've got a little bit of white and Indian yellow mixed together. And I want to work on this part of my wave. It's the cascade where water is crashing over. Now, let's use the corner of our fan brush to add some foam to this crash of the wave. I'm using the same colour, but we'll lighten it up a little later on. Think about how the water just sort of throws itself up into the air and catches the light from the sky. I want to soften this into the back of the wave, so I'll use my blue filbert brush just to touch it in. Let's start working a little bit lower down and adding some more of the foamy effects. I work in layers. Don't forget there's going to be some rocks here as well. I add a little bit of the highlight, not too bright, and then I use some of the blue on my filbert brush just to blend it in. Think about how the wave arrives in sort of sections and how each one has its own little splash and crash and highlight. It takes a little bit of working out, but with practice you can start with a simple wave and just do what I've done, add many layers. Now a little more highlight around the edge of the eye of the wave. Again, just above the blue shadow we put in a few moments ago. As you see, I do a little push and a little press and leave a little imprint of the bristles. Let's zoom in a little closer for this section. Now you can really see the texture of my paint. I'm just dabbing it on and squeezing it from the bristles and letting the brush sort of fly away a little bit. Now you can see how I blend the shadow underneath to the foamy highlights. I want to strengthen the shadow just under the eye of my wave with a little more lavender. Notice how I don't mix up another new colour. I carry on using the same tones all the way through. It'll make your painting more harmonious if you don't start mixing fresh tones and fresh colours. That's something I learned many years ago when I used to mix up so many colours that just all didn't work together. Now, let us sketch back in the position of the rocks using the handle of my filbert brush. Let's also think about putting another little wave in here. It'll need its own shadow line, of course. Let's give it a little foamy top. And of course, we need to blend those two edges together. Are you spotting a common theme here? Waves are highlights, shadows, and blending. Time for some rocks. I've got some dark sienna, and to this I'm adding some of my lavender tone. That sounds like a strange mixture of colours, but actually it just produces a really deep purple colour, perfect for a rock. If it needs to be darker, I'll add some Van Dyke brown. Now, I'm going to take a small amount on the small blade of my palette knife. Watch closely. These are the simplest rocks you can ever wish to paint. Just press the paint down into the painting and let that mixture of brown sienna and the lavender tone mix with the colour of the waves. Don't overwork it. This is just a magic technique and something I really enjoy doing, just letting the paints blend on the knife. And you can almost sort of create the structure of a rock and the foam all in one go. It's a lot of fun to do. And we are tempted sometimes to want to overwork it, but trust me, when you see the finished painting, you'll realise that actually less is more. Just push the colours into each other and let the paint do the work for you. There. See how my rock looks like it's sitting down into the waves? I just let a few holes appear here and there and just scrape off the surplus paint. To frame my wave, I'll add another big rock here on the left. Again, I'm using that sort of hit and miss sort of technique for the rock. I find they give you just such wonderful results and they're really not that hard to do. Next time you paint a rock, see if you can do it the same way. I guarantee you'll be so surprised at how good they can look with such little effort. Now let's add a little bit of a shadow line to the base of this rock. I just want to sort of lose that bottom edge there and just add some darker shadows into the water here, a bit of that lavender and the sienna colour here. And I've done the same again under the rock on the left. I think my painting's starting to come together rather nicely. Let's add a little more shadow here and there though. Again, I just want to add a little bit more depth of colour here under the edge of this foam. It takes a few minutes of sitting back and looking at your painting to realise that sometimes you do need to add more colour. Be brave. You'll see how my painting suddenly comes alive because it was just looking a bit sort of safe and a bit bland. I use my fingers to blend the colours together. Wow, that makes such a huge difference to my painting. I'm really pleased with it. I've washed my filbert brush, it was getting in a bit of a pickle. I'm going to use some titanium white and a little touch of Indian yellow again. I just want a very, very pale yellow colour for my beach. I want to just think about where the light would come over the top of the wave and it would just sort of catch the tops of these little bits of bubbling water on the beach. Just catch the edges here and there. You just want the sort of suggestion of a little bit of light playing across the surface of the water. And then shape up the base of the wave. Water is amazing when it sort of catches the light, especially when it's moving. You'll often get these little sort of, I call them sprites of light bouncing up the surface of a wave. I'll use my liner brush just to add a few little extra sparkles to the surface of the water in the foreground. I'll also add a few little dots of pure white to my wave, just to catch the edge of the foam a little brighter. It's just here and there though, not too much, just a touch. I think my wave's coming on rather well, but there are still a few little touches to go. Remember the sky? I really didn't get a lovely highlight that I was looking for. My painting has sat overnight and it's just started to become a little bit tacky. So I'm going to use my finger and a little bit of pure white. And I'm going to just blend it into the eye of the wave. The paint, as I said, is tacky and it's still just blendable. So don't leave this too long. Overnight is perfect. I'll use my finger to blend that in. And whilst I'm at it, let's add a little bit of a sparkle to the sky as well. You could use the blender brush to do this if you wish. I think my rocks need one last touch as well. I got some more of that lovely pink salmon colour and I just let the knife just bump and touch that sort of heavy paint on my rocks. It really makes them stand out now, doesn't it? Just one little touch of colour can make such a difference to a painting. And finally, a signature. So there you have it, inspired by Bob Ross and a walk on a local beach. But don't move, I have another video all about painting seascapes, shapes and sizes and proportions. It'll really make your next seascape a winner. Happy painting, people.